welcome everyone. We're working from home. We're broadcasting from our various locations. My name is Nancy Mader, and I am the Director of Transition Projects for the Federation for Children with Special Needs. Welcome. Today we're talking about access to the college classroom. So I'm here with my guests, Terry Rodriguez and Kristen Proctor from Quinsigamond Community College, and we work together a lot because I think that they have a really good message, and I think a very realistic message on how students can access college, what they need to get ready to do that. They've worked at various colleges. They have a wealth of experience. They also have their own children who've had to access college, and they've had to navigate that. And it's still hard for them, knowing what they know. It still hasn't been easy. So I think that they have a really great message for families who have students who want to go to college, who are on IEPs or 504s, or have their own struggles, whatever that is. And I think they also have a great message for professionals who are working with those students and those families on how we as professionals can help these students and young people get ready, and how families can support them and how professionals can support them. Because it really does take a village to get a kid in general and through college, and it's a whole different story for students who have, you know, learning challenges or social challenges or a mix of both. So I'm going to let Terry and Kristen introduce themselves, and then we'll get started. We're going to have time for question and answers at the end. This is being recorded, so if you have to log out, you can come back to it. We'll post it on our YouTube page. But thank you for joining us. And Terry, go ahead, and then Kristen, and then we'll get started.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is my first online webinar as a hostess, so I'm a little overwhelmed. So be kind today. Not my first day on Zoom, though, that's for sure.
Nope.
So welcome, everyone. Christy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christy. It shows up as Kristen because that's my formal name in the state. Like any state system, I have to be a Kristen, but I really go by Christy Proctor. And I have to tell you that after many, many years, my daughter has finally graduated with her associates in May. And she really turned to me and said, "Did you do something to get me across the line?" Because she has never, ever really been that successful, you know, and she thought for sure I must have pulled some strings to get her that diploma. And I said, "No, I didn't touch anything. You know, you're done. You're there." So I just have to tell you, it not an easy path, very zigzaggy. So I'm the queen of zigzag. Terry's learning from me.
I'm learning.
Yeah, and we can't wait to talk and share with you a little bit about transition to college, because there's so many nuances to it. We just are going to share some of the procedures that come from working at QCC that may really lend themselves to other places, but the bottom line is communication is going to be really key, and you'll hear that as we talk about how to advocate for our child, as well as to let them start being the adult and advocating for themselves.
And I think it's important too, just so you know what seat I'm in right now. I have a son who's potentially going to graduate in December from QCC after a failed start at a 4-year live-on at the cost of way too much money. And then I also have a son right now who's is one of the seniors of the class of 2020, who is quite happy that he didn't have to walk across the stage, but is planning to be at Rensselaer Polytech in the fall, in which we have no idea if they're on site or remote. So I'm kind of in that. I just have a graduating senior, and then I have a rising senior. I have a daughter who's finishing junior year. So I'm in the thick of it, I think, with a lot of people right now. So just know that I have kind of the mom perspective and the professional perspective.
Right.
I'm going to share the screen. Chris, you want to introduce our
So one thing, you guys, I'm going to be monitoring the chat. So if we use an acronym that you don't understand, or if you have something on the slide you don't understand, I'll be monitoring that, and I will, you know, alert Christy and Terry. And you can type in your questions in the Q&A, and we'll do questions at the end. If I see one that's really relevant to what we're doing right now, I may interject, but for the most part, we're going to try to do Q&A at the end.
Okay, so we want to talk to you first about your dream for your student. And we would like you to use the chat feature to tell us what is your dream for your student. And we'll give you, probably a minute and a half to type something in during this time. Really, again, we're talking about your dream for your student, and no judgment. I mean, I thought I was gonna, before I got married and had kids, I thought I was gonna have 3 boys, and instead I got married and had 3 girls. So my dream got shattered very early in life. But I think we all have a dream and expectation of where we would like to see our son or daughter go. So let's take a look at some of those chats and see what folks are saying. So when you chat, you're going to chat to everyone, to all people. So thank you, Farah.
Of course, I'm having the hard time seeing stuff because I think I'm sharing my screen. So you can see what I can't see right now.
Yeah. So Farah wants her son to go to college and get a degree. And I'm waiting for a few more people to put their response in. Susan just posted, have a successful and fulfilling career and live a happy and independent life. Thank you, Susan. Donna wants to send her daughter to QCC and succeed. Karen, I want my son with ASD to be socially successful and stay self-managed while in college. And he starts in the fall at UMass. And I assume that's UMass Amherst, Karen, and he'll live at home. Pam wants her son to go to college and career if he didn't have his anxiety, depression, and EF disorder, executive functioning. So Karen said her son's going to go to UMass Lowell, one of our favorite places. We know the folks up there. Jody is their accessibility services person. Great office.
Very good office.
And Brenda, son graduated from high school last year, autism, ADHD, wants him to be very successful, but after trying out Middlesex, hopefully he'll try again. Catherine, same, to go to college or trade school, have a successful career. I would like my son to feel that he's capable of attending college, even though he'll need some extra support. That's why we're here. That keeps us at work and employed in a job. Thank you, Heather. And then Suzanne, meaningful employment, independent as possible, and job training life skills program.
Very good.
So I'm glad to see some directionality as to a place, as well as seeing the attributes of character development, personal development, growth, and adulting in there. I'm really pleased to hear that and see that and read that. Any last chats? If not, I'm going to move on. I'll give 10 more seconds for someone to pop anything in. And since not hearing anything is very uncomfortable, I will keep babbling.
Well, and I think for me, just for the parents that have joined us today, my oldest, who's the hopefully graduating in December student from QCC, when he did start off at a big school in New York City, he was not socially or emotionally ready to go there. And we learned that very, very quickly as we started to watch him decompose, as I like to say, over FaceTime. So we thought he was all ready to go. And this is a student, he does not have a disability. I will say that. He's a May baby. I should have held him in kindergarten, like all the things I think us parents talk about when we talk about our kids. But he certainly wasn't emotionally or socially ready. And yet he's a very social kid. But there was just so much that happened being away from home that he was home by December. And so we spent a lot of time kind of unpacking that. And hopefully he's transferring in January, either to UMass Amherst or to Bridgewater. But even right now, having been home with him during remote COVID world, there's still stuff in my brain going, oh my God, I don't know if I can send him. Like, will he be ready? So questions I keep asking.
And Karen shared that just for those reasons, Terry, her son took a gap year. And I just want to respond back to Brenda. Brenda, if you want to talk about failure, we can talk on the side. You know, failure from high school, failure from college. I've had several dropout experiences with my kids, and just, you know, I think one of the nice things, if this is the only nice thing we can take away from COVID-19, is that because of the interruption to the traditional educational trajectory, there's going to be no more expectation, especially here in Massachusetts, that everybody takes foot off the high school ground and plants their next step firmly in the college ground. There's going to be so much more variation in how things look. And I think that allows us as parents to have more flexibility and more understanding from other people and less judgment that our child isn't going to college and isn't really currently in a four-year program or this, that, or the other thing. And I'm really looking forward to seeing some things really shaken up in that way, because I've always been one to really resist once my kids didn't take the full, you know, four-year lockstep, and really open my mind to so many possibilities and really what's best for them. I think COVID is doing that for the rest of us. So the rest of the nation in some ways. So I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, there are some advantages, certainly. So
okay, so slide. What is the dream for your student? Now we're going to ask you another question.
So which path? Okay, so please note that some of you may have seen the Christy Terry show in the past, so some of this may look familiar. We have added some new features into this presentation. And like Christy just said, you know, coming remote in this last 3 months of our lives has changed a lot of perceptions. We know there's a lot of statistics out there right now that the traditional high school senior is going to take a gap year this year. Yeah. So we're looking at this array of what path are students going to choose after high school. You know, some of you have students who really should maybe take that time to socially, emotionally mature and stay in the 18 to 22 pocket and get some more funding from the school system to do some exploration in terms of job work and so forth and readiness. Some students will take a gap year, and hopefully that gap year is a little bit more meaningful than playing League of Legends in their basement, because that's what I've got going on at my house right now. Is I haven't seen my sons in 3 months because I think they're on computers all the time. I mean, I know they are. The other thing is maybe some of your students might want to do some adult work, agency work, and do some training programs. Maybe it is taking just a quick certificate in Safe Serve. There's a lot of things that students can do right now that are just minute pieces of a bigger job idea. Then go ahead.
No, go ahead, Terry. Tell the last thing. I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
And so there's also, you could do community college certificate programs, which is a much smaller degree, versus a community college associate's degree, which is the 2-year more traditional degree for transfer, or if you want to be like a dental hygienist, you have to have that associate's degree. And then over here on the other side of the slide, we have the 4-year college live at home, the 4-year college live on experience, which are two very different experiences, versus just going out there to the world of work. So depending on what your student wants for themselves and what may be the best step right now, there's a lot of options. There's a lot of options to think through. Christy?
Well, I was wondering if we're ready to do the poll now. If
we're ready, you guys. I did it. I did the poll.
Oh, good.
I'm going to launch the poll right now.
Launch the poll. So if everybody can click on a poll response, the question is, what do you think your student will do after 12th grade? Again, a little bit different than the dream, but slightly a different nuance. So we've got several responses here. All you have to do is just click on one of the responses and it will automatically start tabulating. And we'll be able to see the polling responses in a moment. So
it's really organized and cool, by the way, ladies.
Yeah, I did it, you guys. First poll.
Well, the reason polls are fun too is because it helps us see what other people are thinking.
Yep. And if you're a professional, you know, not everyone on here is parents, maybe pick a couple of students in your mind, or one that you're working with particularly right now what you would see, you know, what you'd like to see for them for their future.
And the only thing we didn't include on this poll, honestly, is if I had put an other in there, I would have, for anybody who's thinking maybe active military, that doesn't always come up as an obvious choice when we're doing presentations with the Federation, but it's an option. But I mean, I'm not sure, that would have been an other that would have been on the slide.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're showing 15 responses. Does anybody else want to click on one of the poll items? I'll give you 10 more seconds and we'll close the poll at 1:45.
All right, poll closed.
Okay, so here's the results.
Let me share them. Oops.
Oh, I love Brenda. Brenda put, if hers had been other, actually stay at home and play on the computer. And she has a, you know, I hope that sounds like you, Brenda.
Listen, I'm the first one to tell you, I've got the hard Dungeons and Dragons, League of Legends kind of kids in my sons. Whereas my daughter's the athlete, just completely different than her brothers.
So it looks like our top response is the associates, followed quickly by the gap year. And we went to a webinar last week that estimated that over 17,000 students this year have planned not to go on to anything but take a gap year. So I don't know what that gap year would look like. And Terry and I have some ideas, but we know that traditionally you usually work. I hope there's going to be some work out there. So the gap year and community college associates, top two, and then we get also the 4-year live on campus. So great. I don't see people doing adult training program on this poll that we just took, but there might be folks in the audience who did that. So thank you for taking that poll. Okay, let's head on.
Heavy on. Okay.
And thank you, Nancy. You're just the hostess with the mostest.
You are.
Well, let's wait till the end.
Okay. So here's just all the ideas we're going to try to cover today. And, you know, we've already talked to Nancy. If we don't get everywhere we want to get today, please know that we're already considering coming back in round 2. So we could be back by popular demand if we don't get everywhere we need to go today. Okay, so we're going to talk about this just without reading the slide to you all. We're going to just jump right in. The differences between secondary education and high school and higher education, right? So I think most, if you've never heard this, let me be the first to share this with you. It is completely different how the federal regulations are written for the secondary education versus higher education. So when your student is in the K-12 system, they are covered by the Individuals with Disability Act, or IDEA, that was from 1997. The way this law is written is your school system, through the IEP process, has to help your child achieve success. All right, that's very simplified, I understand. But really, this is about my son will demonstrate algebra at an 80% or better, those objectives that are written, right? Whereas in higher education, we're under the laws of Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and ADA, which was redone in 2008. And what we do has everything to do with access, about having access to the college curriculum, access to the college environment. That what we do is we really look at the barriers to learning and how we can make sure there's an accommodation in place that will level the playing field for the barrier. Christy, do you have anything to add? Okay. Any questions? This is always a hard one because the reality is, as we move from K-12 to higher ed, this is what the partners at the high school table look like. You have your student and you're surrounded by your family, your high school liaisons, and potentially your adult agencies, hopefully by senior year, if not earlier. But you all get to come to the party and you get to all have a say at the table. Whereas when your student moves to college, and for our person whose son may not have had a good experience at Middlesex, the student drives the bus in college. The student has to activate, the student has to disclose. Us people in accessibility services, the adult agencies, and the parents and the families, We only support them. What the student needs, the student has to ask for, and they have to have this interactive conversation with people in accessibility services. So if a student's been pretty wrapped in, I always like to say, if your student was heavily aided in high school, college is going to look very different because aids are not part of the college accommodation process, which is also sometimes very hard. If they're used to having time in either supported resource, I don't want to even call it resource room anymore, but if they're going someplace to get their homework done in the middle of the day, that's not, they can do that in a tutoring center, but it's not required. So you have the freedom factor of going to a college campus, which looks a little bit different. Anything to add, Christy?
Yes, I'd also say that this is that point where, you know, of the year where we see a lot of students coming in right now from the high school or returning to school after some gap time. And a lot of them are still looking to their parent to accompany them to meetings or to make phone calls for them. And I just want to state that as an office, we take this as a real important developmental step moving forward, that we will invite moms to Zoom meetings, but the questions will really be asked of and answered by the student, that the student needs to have some skin in the game, as we say, and needs to really request those accommodations. And we'll do a lot of coaching to help with that. I think the hard thing is that we get the student who really is so happy to shed that stigma of being known as a student in the high school who uses SPED services, that they want to try it on their own. They want to shed it. Like I said, they want to forge a new identity. And that's the student who we get sometimes the frantic phone call from a mother in October, or the referral from a professor in November saying, this student, I don't know what they're doing in my class, but they're not showing up. They're not handing in assignments. I can't get a hold of them. They've disappeared. Or the parent who says, I don't know what, I know they're not doing anything, but I don't have access to school records. Can you tell me what, if they're going to class? And we really can't help with that. We really can only support the students who disclose to us. And we will certainly, when we meet with a student, describe how best we can help them while they maintain their independence. And it becomes less about the disability and more about what barriers do you encounter in your environment and how can we work on that. So while we need the documentation initially to verify the disability exists, that a major life activity is qualified as being unable to be met as a disability, we really turn the focus around. And what we've learned in all our years of doing this is everyone is so different that we would never want to say, well, they're just this or just that. We would really engage in a process to find out where their strengths, their weaknesses, their preferences, their way their disability manifests, whether with medication, without medication, certain types of the year, certain types of circumstances. It may manifest in a discussion board, but not during a test. Or it may manifest on a test, but not for when they have to write on a discussion board. So we're really good at talking to them, not condescending to them, but really getting to some of the meat and potatoes of how they live with their disability as opposed to the label. Terry, you want to talk about documentation?
Very quickly, let me just add in, I know this has been a very interesting year. So my senior parents and even my junior parents right now, and then any of the school folks who are joining us today, we know that the IEP process is kind of on hold. And that's going to mess with everybody. We know that. So typically, we know that people are supposed to be being retested right now. I know that's part of the process. So I really encourage our families to really think about and work with their school system on how they're going to manage that coming into the next academic year. Because these are things that you don't want to put the brakes on, because you need that documentation going forward, correct? So I think it's really important that there's a process you have to work with your school about. We're not typically looking for the IEP, but we're looking for the testing that goes with the IEP to determine accommodation. because the accommodations in high school do not always translate to the college, and that's a fun side for a minute or so from now. But basically, if looking at the difference in disability, the qualification categories right now, you know, this is essentially what we're looking for at QCC. It's kind of, depending on where you go, this is the moment where I always like to pick on Boston University, because everybody, you know, people who know me, I love to do this. We're pretty good at QCC about taking IEP, and we really want to see if the scores are listed in there, but we really need to see the testing scores. But we also are a little bit more broader, because we know a lot of our students are going to work with adult agencies. And so if you qualify to work with an adult agency, clearly there's a documented disability, and we'll work with the agency to get documentation also. But if you look at, just for fun, go over to the Boston University website, and Lorraine Wolf is lovely, but they want you to have all neuropsych testing within the last year in order to qualify for services at Boston University, which some of you folks know that's at the tune of maybe $3,000 that none of us easily have at this moment in time. So just be aware that every college will ask you for different documentation in the sense of what they require. We're pretty liberal because we know we're a community college. We know we're working with a lot of students from various socioeconomics. We know we're going to get what we can get. So just note, though, the big thing is for psychological, especially within the last year, we want that documentation from the qualified person, mostly because that's one of those disabilities that changes on a dime. So we need to make sure we have the most up-to-date information. And any thoughts?
Okay, so let me answer this question from Pam. Can testing for document needs be private, or must it be an evaluation done through the public schools? We are not discriminatory. We'll take anything. We will not take a prescription pad, but we will start with that and then go further. And then the other piece I should say is that a lot of 504 documentation, will take that as well. We really find that we have a lot of students who disclose for medical conditions, but until the symptoms become a barrier in class, we don't see them until such that they're hospitalized or symptoms flare up. So please explain to anyone with medical conditions such that, you know, it's not like you have to come and see us every day. I mean, you're not tied to us. It's when you need us, we're there to support you. And if you don't need us, you know, still come see us and say hi and stop in our Zoom office hours. But you know, that's the piece that we're hoping students will learn they can manage on their own, so that they know when they need us, we're there. The other piece I want to bring up in this time of COVID, and I'm going to kind of ask this as a question for everyone. I am assuming everyone's anxiety has gone up. There isn't an official diagnosis called COVID anxiety, but you know, it's an interesting question. If everyone's anxiety has gone up due to COVID, or if when we come back into society's regular flow and ebb of moving around, that heightens anxiety, is that a disabling condition? And I would say that for right now, the documentation and things that we're looking at is really just not for the short term, but for a chronic condition. So if your son or daughter is having some more anxiety due to COVID, you know, we'll certainly explore that with them. But please understand that a lot of times we have documentation for a specific disability, but as we talk with someone, we understand there's underlying other issues due to circumstances such as COVID. We'll definitely try to support as much as possible.
Okay, next one. So when you so for example, if you're going to join us at QCC, what we're going to initially do, you're going to have your son or daughter call in to make an intake appointment. They can do it. We can do it through the phone. We're all working from home. We all have phones. We also do it through email. But basically what we're going to do is assign your son or daughter to a coordinator of accessibility services. And that will be their person when they come through our office. And that's going to be the person that helps them with some advising concerns like placement of courses, what classes to take, as well as determining accommodation, reading your documentation, and determining accommodations for your courses. So that's their starting point. That's the person they're going to be assigned to, and that will stick with them for their time at QCC. And they're their best resource. I'm going to say that our coordinators right now have been working remote since March 13th. And their first response is, I feel like I have some better relationships right now because they're having more in-depth phone conversations or Zoom conversations with their students without the interruption of the in and out of the office. So our coordinators are feeling very confident in the work that they're doing right now with students as they help them. So, I mean, that's a great piece of feedback for the relationship that they really work to build.
So we're a relationship student first office, and I think that's shared going into COVID, and it continues to be that way. I know that some people feel, well, gee, I feel like all I do is go to webinars or do this or that. No, our coordinators still want to have a strong relationship with their caseload students. And if anything, I'd say that they're using more FaceTime, more Google Hangouts, more of those types of ways to
Meeting
connect
students where they are, yeah. Duo, whatever they have, they're trying to have those conversations. Okay, so really what the coordinators do with your son or daughter is they have what we call the interactive process conversation. They really are trying to determine what is your student asking for in terms of the college environment, and what are the barriers for them of learning, and then how do we provide access through the accommodation. And really the reality is does the request fundamentally alter the curriculum? So that's really what we do. These may not be things that are said in the K-12 system, but this is exactly what we're really looking at as we try to help students in the higher ed world. So with that in mind, I'm going to pull up a different slide, so bear with me. I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and I'm going to pull up a second screen. You know, some days I'm really good at this, and some days I'm not. Okay. So we have a quick quiz here for you. Can everybody see that? Does it look okay from your side, everyone?
Looks okay here. I only go down. There we go. Now
All
it
right.
shows 36. Perfect.
Okay. So
Thank you, Donna.
just so you know, we'd like you to take a minute and start to read through these. I would say, you know, circle them, but you really can't. But we're going to give you a moment to read through this, and then I want to please people in the chat box start putting in there if you see a pattern in responses. Oh, I shifted it, sorry. Anybody noticing the pattern yet?
Thank you, Karen. They're all accommodations, Terry, that we write into IEPs, PLEP A typically. And I assume, Karen, you're referring to the secondary environment. So would these be accommodations provided at QCC, true or false?
Oh, hold on a second. I don't know why
And
it's stopped.
that's okay. And Karen's saying false.
Can you see me now?
No. If you can go back to the panel, though.
I know. I'm going to do that right now. Ah, hold up. Ah. Too much stress and pressure.
Ooh, it's both. She's an educator and a parent. That's awesome. Donna says false.
Okay, let me try.
Oh, I see what you're doing, Terry. Good. Okay, so Farah wrote to everyone, not all, because many look more like modifications, not accommodations. Any other observations? Now, Terry, you're muted. So if you can unmute and tell us the magic pattern that goes with this.
Seriously, it's like the first day with training wheels. Okay, everybody. I drew a line at number 21 for a reason, because anything above 21 is not a college level accommodation. I agree with Farah, who said they're modifications. We don't modify in the college environment. We accommodate, but we do not modify. So my favorite is, years ago, I had a student show up and say, I don't have to take essay. I don't have to write essays for English. What do you mean you don't have to write essays for college English? Well, you know, that was on my AP that I only had to take multiple choice tests. I'm like, oh no, that's not how that works. So it's sad, but I've seen that happen. Really, below 21 are college accommodations. These are things that we typically do at the college level. Now, there's always a debate between from number 1 to number 21. Would you ever do that? This is what the interactive process is for. So these are things that we typically don't do. Well, let's use word banks on tests and quizzes. Word banks are not something a college professor is going to give an individual. They give it to the entire class, it's universal design. But if someone needs a word bank, it may not happen. And we'd have to really delve into why a student would need a word bank to complete a vocabulary test. Because the word bank would potentially be a fundamental alteration of the learning that's being measured. So this is how we approach, why we call it the interactive process, because everything is kind of a case by case depending situation. Any other questions about this? And I know someone had asked at the top of this, yes, we've shared these forms with Nancy, and so she'll make them available afterwards, just so you know, you can have this. But really, 21 and below are college level accommodations. So I'm going to go stop sharing that screen. I'll go back to the slideshow. All right, and we're back, and we're back. Okay. Hopefully that didn't scare too many people. Christy, do you want to do this one?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I've sat in so many IEP meetings, both as an advocate and for my own children, my own 3 daughters going through. And I really set the expectation when my daughter was a freshman that by the time she was a senior, she herself would be running the IEP meeting. And I had a great person at our high school who totally agreed with me and really worked hard to make sure that the skills that she would have as a senior would be really those she needed as a freshman wherever she went. So you really want your accommodations in the last setting to replicate what you're going to have in the next setting so that you can try everything out with support. So for my student, the IEP was done so well. It was a very easy transition with the documentation that was done because she had probably, I have the binders here, okay? Her documentation binder just for high school was like that big. And there was so much that I made sure she was doing independently. I really stopped looking at the school, the online school system. I stopped checking homework. I really became a free range parent. And you know how hard that is for all of us who are in this realm. But I think that for the most part, when she went forward, depending on what she was taking, some classes needed accommodations and some didn't. And I'm going to share the sad story of my daughter in that the very last course she needed for her degree was math because she could not do math. And she actually went on to transfer to a 4-year school, a sleepaway college, as we affectionately call them. And she ended up coming back to QCC to do math online. And it was just painful. So some things can be accommodated. Some things they just have to, you know, like she had to take math. There was no other way around it. So did I tell her take math right away after high school? Yes. Did she listen to me? No. So some of the things that are going to be accommodations are definitely, you know, access is important, but as to when they get fulfilled and when they get put into play may vary from semester to semester and course by course. So I just want to let you know it's very fluid. Nothing from your freshman year stays the same to your next semester or the year after. And the other piece that was really surprising for my second daughter is that teachers really aren't consistent in the way they apply the attendance policy. Let's just call it that. She's had professors who don't care if she shows up 10 minutes late, and those who, if you are 5 minutes late, you're marked absent. And she had to ask for an incomplete because she didn't have the ability to get her butt on time, you know, executive functioning problems. So sometimes accommodations will, and she had there's no accommodation for attendance in that if you're late, you know, as much as she wanted one. So anyways, I just want to share with you that, you know, communication again will be key. And if there are issues, the person to come back to is their coordinator. And there's a lot of problem solving that goes on throughout the semester, and not to wait until things blow up and there's a bad grade at the end. It's very important to communicate throughout the semester.
I think the other caveat too is our special notes down below. Behavior is, you're expected to behave as a college student. And it's really important that we all understand that it's not negotiated, or accommodated. We have plenty of conversations with students about outbursts in classroom and how to behave as a, you know, what is typical college behavior. But some behavior will get a student into the code of conduct issues. And at that point, the dean of students is involved, and we have had students suspended. So I think it's really important that if someone's had a coach or a aide just to control behavior, that's a real conversation as you come into the college environment, because you may not, that's something that we would not accommodate in terms of what we would give for an accommodation. And I throw that out there. All right. So this past October, QCC, we as an office, we host what we call our agency high school breakfast. And we do this every year. And this year we took a poll of your high school and your adult agencies and about a couple of questions, and here are their responses. The next two slides really are about how their perceptions of how do you know a kid is ready to go to college. Okay, so how do you determine if your student or client is ready to go to college? And these were all the things that our peers came up with. Can a student follow through? Are they motivated? Are they emotionally ready? Can they complete their own financial aid form and their admissions forms? Are they hardworking? And do they understand themselves? So these were all things that were received back by the poll that we did of our attendees. Again, it goes back to, we were talking earlier about executive functioning skills. These are really important for college. Mm-hmm. The next slide has everything to do with what college transition strategies worked well in your setting. So let's face it, we just lost 3 months for our seniors that they would have done college tours, or their faculty would have brought them to campus. We have a lot of schools that they come to campus, we do a whole show for just the students. So now we're having to look at colleges in a different way. I find it ironic because my son, who is a senior, visited colleges this summer with my husband. The college he's chosen to go to, he's never been to campus, and he's only done the virtual tour. I can't make that one up, can I? So anyways, there's usually a lot of summer programming, which this summer is not going to happen in a face-to-face environment. It's going to be all remote. I know here at QCC we'll be remote this summer. We're going to be doing some remote work with just like this with our students. So some of the things that we typically would have done are not getting done right now. And we'll have a conversation. We have some information about that next. So these were all things that are, again, your high school administrator, your high school special ed providers, guidance counselors, and your adult agencies all shared with us. But the reality is once we got through this conversation and we're having this great breakfast and all these conversations are coming up, finally, we talked about the elephant in the room. And that is, how can we better educate our parents about the transition to college? And that was really the moment where the whole room went, oh yeah. And so with the things that they see as important, we want to make sure you understood what they found important, and then also try to find out from parents themselves, what are some things that you think are going to be important as your child moves on to the higher ed arena? What are some things that you're thinking of already? And feel free to give us that information. I know, and we came to see the Federation this fall also, and for me right now, I just wish my oldest, who's 20, would pick up his damn shoes. Like, take your shoes out of my living room and put them either in the mudroom or in your room. We're not even talking about, can you do your own laundry? Can you cook a meal? Can you make a doctor's appointment? I just need you to move your shoes. Oh, and did you brush your teeth? Like at 20 and 18, I'm still reminding these boys to do these things. So anything that you can think of that would be important, your student knows before they move on to college.
So I want to go back to something really quick because Caitlin asked, what if your student needs someone to accompany them to campus? We have it look many different ways. And again, that's that conversation about what the needs are, whether it's classroom appropriate behavior or if it's outside the classroom appropriate behavior. You know, it can look many different ways, but if DDS or you have the ability to have a behavioral assistant accompany the student to class or to campus, that's certainly something we'll work with you on.
And we do work with PCAs too. Like I'm trying not to scare everybody, but I feel like it's important to throw it out there that it does look different. And it's not paid for by the college. It's paid either through adult agencies or out-of-pocket expenses for parents. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. No,
I think something important to think about in that area too is work after college. So if you have someone accompanying your student to college, will then someone be accompanying them to work? Because that's kind of what you're setting up there. So I think you think about it in years of phasing out that person so that your student can then go on to a competitive job so they can use this degree that they've worked towards or certification or whatever it is they're working towards at a college. So thinking about it in a system where maybe freshman year they have more supports and it starts to fade throughout their college years so they are better prepared for work, because we don't want to give them so many supports that then they can't go out into the real world. That's my thoughts as a rehab counselor. So
skills for college, skills for life.
So I think one of the neat things for me is seeing one of the kids who I was a BLA for when he was in second grade come to QCC and do well, except for one day he was running up and down the hallways. So I went out there and I said to him, is this college level behavior? That's all I said. And got a very long drawn no, sort of answer. But, people are very mindful of the expectations, but sometimes the impulse control gets the better of them. And I just went, and so then I went back in the office. So, it doesn't mean that you need someone there 24/7. But sometimes you need someone there just with the student at specific stressful times. And if you know some classes are going to be stressors, they need to be in the classroom, or if you just need to be on campus. So there's a lot of different ways to look at this. So, and our PCA, of course, was with our student who's medically in need of the PCA 24/7. So that was a very specific instance. So, you know, we're used to it.
So then the question for our parents and families right now is, how will you know your son or daughter is ready to go? What are going to be, in your mind, what are the things you want to be to see, the benchmarks you kind of put in place for your own family and your own son or daughter, that you know that they're ready to go? And you know, feel free to add that into the chat box if you want to share how you know they're ready to go. But I think the other part of that question is how are you planning to assist them in the transition? Because it is a big transition from high school to college. Not only is the workload different, the academic day is different. They're not on campus 6 hours a day if they're doing the commuting. If they're remote, like, what are you going to do to help out is really the question that we want you to be pondering right now.
I think that's such a great question, and I think it can be on really simple levels, you know, getting themselves up in the morning, or
That's huge.
It's huge, especially if they're going to go away to college. You know, if you've gotten them up every morning for all of their adult life or their young life, what are they going to do when they get there? If they're really hard sleepers, how are they going to hear an alarm? How are they going to, you know, use a syllabus instead of a set schedule? Or, you know, there's so many little things that become much bigger when they start college. So you don't have to think big here. You can think really small things that you think they need to do to get ready, or when you know they'll be ready.
So again, I know Christy is my coach on this, because for a woman who has 3 girls who demonstrate a lot more social emotional control than 2 out of my 3 kids, it really has been about, the best advice I've ever gotten so far is it really has to be about empowering my student to be an adult, right? It's about the follow through. Are they capable of follow through? Are they attending their IEP meetings? Are they having a say in that? You know, making sure that in this adulting process, they're owning stuff. They can go to the bank. They know how to take money out of the bank. They have some kind of a checking account. They have control over their documents. They need to know where all their documents are that they may need beyond you. Christy has this phenomenal strategy of binders, and I've seen them right down to the little, she could show you, there's no one on the floor of her office right now. Unlike me, who has, oh, where's that paper? And I have some things in like see, this is Christy.
And this is Corinne's drawing, probably from 7th grade. I'm very visual, but
and
these
that's
are all
her Corinne's documentation
everything
that she needs. But I think the other side of this is about food prep and shopping and texting boundaries, and can your kid make a haircut appointment? Transportation. You know, I have my middle kid who's about to go off to college. He refuses to get his license. He has no desire, and he's perfectly capable. He just doesn't want to do it. And you know, for some of us that are in my age bracket, that was like the first thing. We couldn't wait to get our license. And I grew up in Vermont, so I got my license on the day of my 16th birthday, and I'm like, sweet, I'm out, right? This kid, he's perfectly content right here. All right. So this is what Christy and I have added in for some food for thought now. And this is, it is clear, and we're almost at 1 o'clock, and we really want to talk quickly about the remote environment. And I don't know how people are on time. I know Christy and I can stick around, but we'd like to go into this. So if you can stay on, that would be great.
Well, it's being recorded, so if they can't stay on, I extended this webinar. So if you can't stay on, you can catch it. It will be on our YouTube page, but feel free to stay on and continue, you know, interacting with us.
Great. Okay, Christy, do you want to introduce?
Yes. So in this slide, which we stole from another website, we did not make this up, but we love the fact that there's so many different variations of a theme here with remote, that remote for one person can mean remote for another person, a totally different thing. So professors are not consistent in remote delivery. So I want to share with everyone that just like when you have your in face-to-face classes, not every professor lectures from the front versus has discussions versus does labs. There's just a lot of different ways for people to teach remote as well. So one of the technology challenges we have now is understanding which professors teach online synchronously, which means in real time, sitting at their desk in front of the computer Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 10 o'clock, versus those professors who teach and lay everything out, and then students just have to complete the work by specific deadlines. So we just want everyone to be aware that the remote environment, we're all experiencing and learning for the first time. We're learning a lot of software. We're learning a lot of apps. We're trying to figure out discussion posts as accommodations. Is it voice memo or is it actually typing a response? So there's just so many variations to this theme. And I would say the hardest thing that really we hear coming from our students is that they're encountering is the motivation has nothing to do with the school at all or accommodations. It's the intrinsic motivation to sit down and get the work done because of all the distractions at home. Now, for this little tableau in front of you, the dog may be a distraction, but it may be watching Netflix. It might be something that's more enthralling to do, like go to the beach. I mean, you know, there's just other things going on. So the motivation and discipline will really make a big difference as to the courses and how they're how your student does in them. And I really hope that as they go to a place where everything is new, that they'll really take time to study that environment, look at the online course shell, go over the syllabus, ask their coordinator if they don't understand anything, and be able to say, I can do this with support, or this is not for me, and try to drop their class and pick up another class in the meantime. There's just going to be a whole nother set of critical thinking skills, but the work and discipline and motivation needed will be the same. It will just kind of show itself in a different way. So any comments? And thank you for your thank yous. I appreciate that. I know some people have to head out.
I mean, just as a human being working in this and as an adult, it's so distracting. I find myself working longer days because I can't not be distracted. So I can't imagine how that is for young people who are used to just going to school, you know, from 8 until 2:30. So, you know, there's going to have to be some kind of, you know, getting them to commit to a schedule or a certain location, you know, turn everything else off, you know, depending on what your living situation is. We live in a small condo in the city, so I don't have a lot of space. So if that's the situation, you know, there's going to have to be a lot of navigating to be successful in remote learning. And then there's some people who are excelling right now in remote learning. So, you know, it's a very different world we're living in.
So that's a great segue, because that leads us now to some questions we want you all to think about and have your student think about with remote learning. And, you know, is this the year, is it a good time to transition into the college environment? So first and foremost, many of us had the high school K-12 remote experience with our sons and daughters. And I know for me, having two, it was two very different experiences, which led to two very different attitudes about remote learning. So really, it's really being able to unpack what went well for your student and what was frustrating for your student, and really how much support did they need to do the work. Again, what Christy was saying, are they intrinsically motivated, or do they need, you know, if you do this, I'll turn the internet on for you, or, you know, that was my house. Like, the internet in my house goes down at 1 o'clock in the morning, because I was finding that my sons were up until 4 in the morning doing whatever they do. And I'm like, oh no, we need to bring it down. because they'll sleep until 2 in the afternoon. So we needed to try to adjust their schedule. That's something as a parent I did. We're like, ooh, this is not going well. All right, but because everything went remote. I think the other thing, it's an important consideration is, what are your assets at home? Do you have the computer? Do you have the reliable internet access? How many people? I have literally 5 of us working from home right now. I have a husband who works out of Boston who's been here the whole time. Myself, the kids, we're all here working at the same time, typically during the day. So is your internet reliable? I think the work ethic, is your student able to focus when they're online? And are they willing to work with little or no supervision? And then lastly, are they mature enough to manage the screen time? And I'm going to tell you, that came out of Casa Rodriguez, because I can tell you right now, I have one who literally cannot manage the screen time. So it's really important that, you know, I support my student and say, okay, this is a maturity issue. You've got to be able to balance hanging out with your friends online, because that's where all your friends are, to doing the work that's in front of you. And I think Christy alluded to it earlier, the faculty expectations, you know, as the college goes into this remote environment, some of our faculty are very well-trained online professors, whereas like you've probably experienced in the K-12 system, you know, if they were a good teacher beforehand, they got it. But if they weren't a good teacher beforehand, didn't mean this environment made it any easier for them either. And I say that with all the kindness in my heart. And I think that when we talk about college coursework, we're talking about classes that are synchronous, which means if you were supposed to be in your seat at Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 11 a.m., they maintain that schedule, versus this asynchronous, which means a faculty could record themselves, you could watch it whenever you want and do the work as you needed, but with deadlines in place. For the college environment, you have to learn how to navigate a learning management system. So at QCC, we have what we call Blackboard, but that's where all your course materials are, which is great because you can get to all your stuff online, but you have to figure out how the faculty arranged it in Blackboard. Some faculty are requiring discussion boards or responding to discussion questions, and they have a deadline. And can your son or daughter do that? I know that Christy and I teach a class, and even with support, it's sometimes difficult to get more than a 3-word answer to have it count as something. And then lastly, there really is a difference between remote learning, hybrid learning, and online learning. A lot of it goes back to the training of the faculty member involved, but online is, they've been doing it for a long time. Everything's fully online. Hybrid, that means there's some face-to-face time as well as online. So for example, as we move into the fall, how are we going to get some of those people who need to do lab work? And that would be more hybrid. They would come into campus for possibly lab work. Like, these are decisions that are not made yet, but this is part of the conversation. There's just certain things you have to do in dental hygiene that require you to be in the lab to do it. And then lastly, this remote, which is what we're having this meeting remote. It's great that we have this opportunity, but it would have been better face-to-face. Depends on your learning style. So these are definitely remote questions we want you and your son or daughter to consider as you're thinking about, is next year the time to go? Because not everybody's made their announcements yet as to what their college plans on doing. So with that being said, I know that here at QCC, we probably will be remote in the fall. We know we're home until through December. We don't have all the details yet on how, what will be hybrid, like biology labs, things like that. We don't have all that information yet, but I know we will be remote. So for some of you, that may change wholeheartedly how you approach community college. Maybe it's you only take 1 class at a time versus trying to take 3 classes. So strategizing what makes sense. And I know my son, who was in 5 in the spring semester, withdrew from 2 before the end because he just couldn't do calculus 2 remotely. He needed to be in a room with people to learn that subject. So he figured that out pretty quickly when he lost all motivation in the class. Again, what I know, and I watched it decompress in front of me. Decomposition.
Well, for the transition, I just want to share some good news. So because of doing everything to remote, you and your son or daughter can actually stay at home and do everything from apply to the college, fill out any forms you need to fill out, find information on how to fill out the FAFSA. You can register for classes through email. Like everything that might have been a hurdle before, if it were your son or daughter had to get to campus to do things in person, that's all gone away. We do everything now online. So for some students, it's really easy for them to take saved copies of their IEP and just put them into our document Dropbox, and they're sucked up into our system. So in some ways, we've made the transition process much easier because you can do it from home. So please know that for anyone whose son or daughter has social anxiety, they're going to love this. They're going to love remote. They're going to love that everything is done really when they're ready to do it. And they don't have to meet anyone in person until they start their class. And then, of course, they may be in a Zoom call like we are doing here with some interaction and discussion groups. So please know that, you know, for our kiddos who don't drive, this is really good. Good to know. And we're really, really trying to be remote in so many ways and using so many platforms, so many tools. So if your son or daughter only uses Snapchat, that's one thing we don't use. Okay, so no Snapchat, but pretty much, no TikTok. I should say that too.
Oh, you never know. We might be TikToking before the summer's out. I don't know.
But we do use a lot of other tools. So so for your son or daughter, sometimes they're more savvy, right, than us as parents. Some of them really just take to it. They're like, oh, no big deal. I know how to do this. And they do it real quick. So it's cool.
I have to say my 8-year-old is in Google Classroom and he's navigating it and yelling at me like, Mom, that's not how you do it. Because he was using it at school and he's 8, you know? So I was like, God, don't yell at me. I'm new to it.
I'll do. So yeah, there are options.
Yeah. Okay, any last questions as we think about what's coming up? And of course, we're already in June and July right now. I just have to say, no matter if or when your child knows when they're going, just automatically have them do a FAFSA, because that's such a pain in the butt to do as a parent. I just have to tell you, it's the worst. But once you do it, it's easier every year. And once you do it, then your son or daughter can fill it out too. So please know that our classes are going to begin after September, and we are going to do the traditional semester, including coming back after Thanksgiving. And that there are a lot of resources we can share as it comes available to us for financial aid, scholarships, grants, this, that, or the other thing. So we're really here to help on many levels.
And I think it's important as your son or daughter goes through the intake process and we're getting them onboarded. The traditional placement test has been suspended for this summer just because we can't put a bunch of people in a room to take a placement test. So we're doing multiple measures in terms of how we're placing students into coursework. And part of that is there's some questions having to do with math. Your transcripts are going to be reviewed, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's really important you connect with the coordinator so you know how, without getting into that, but there is no placement test per se, but they are still going to look at MCAS scores. If your son or daughter took the SAT, they're going to look at different things so they can determine the right placement for the academic year. Okay. And then the last couple of slides, you know, what's one small change you can make this week to empower your student? And then the other question for our folks today is, what adjustments can you make this month to empower your student? So thinking about what you can do to help your student be more prepared and more ready.
Why don't we share those in the chat, Terry?
Yes, feel free. And then that just leads us to our last slide anyways, which is, oh, no, maybe not. Sorry about that. I got ahead of myself. Anything in the chat? Chrissy, I can't see my chat box right now.
Oh, I know. I'm watching too. We have a few thank yous. Thank you for the webinar. I'm just letting people know. Okay. So to be more independent in schoolwork is the first step, small step. I'd say that's lifelong, isn't it? But just to even start right now, I know it's the last week of school, but it's something to have in the forefront as you move forward and as your son or daughter ages. Anybody else with a share about the adjustment you can make this month or this week to help them become empowered or more independent? Okay, this is awesome. Karen, I relate to this so much. Get him back on schedule, i.e. wake up, do some online practice quizzes for college placement. My kids, it just kills me. They're all night owls now, like not having to go to school. They've completely flipped. They're getting up at 1. I mean, I know they could do it at college too, but I want them to be up when we're up, I guess. That's again my dream, but
No, it's my dream too, because they wake me up all night.
yeah, but having a schedule is important. So Farah said, letting him be independent with his schedule and waking up on time. See, that's great. Let's have them wake up by a specific time and then let them be independent. But there's something about, maybe it was the way I was raised, you don't sleep past 9. So, oh well.
Yeah, I feel like the chore board is back out in my house.
Gen X differences.
I
So
tell you.
Sarah, thank you, Karen.
So just so you know, here are some of the agencies that as a college we work with pretty closely. I know we're speaking with MRC in the next few days about where we're at in terms of the college coming into the fall semester. But these are all the different folks we work with. We have very well established relationships with them. Our coordinators, either go to meetings with them or we meet with them. So it's really important that you know that we are not solo in what we do. And then lastly, just any other final thoughts or questions for us today?
And like we indicated in the chat, please feel free to reach out to us at any time. I know we've gone over, so this may not be as robust as when we usually present because it's hard to do this in person. But please know that Terry and I really strive to be helpful on so many different levels that we'll be happy to help if we can or point you in a resource. Same with Nancy. Nancy can point out resources as well.
You know what? I think one of my questions is what kind of questions would you guys recommend students and families asking a college disability center? Like, what are some of the questions? So, you can't, if you have a lot of needs, you can't go to a college where they have one person in the accessibility services office. So what are some of the things that parents should be asking or thinking about when they're looking at colleges?
That's a good one. It's interesting because we've worked really hard, QCC has worked really hard all these years to make sure that we have some support systems in place for students. So for example, within our office, we're very lucky to have 3 learning specialists right now who work one-on-one with students, but students have to qualify for that level of above and beyond service. And I know that some of the 4-year schools offer above and beyond services, but they're paid services. So for example, Dean and Curry have very well-established LD centers for extra support, but that's above and beyond paid services. So you want to find out what the college is offering for free, besides accommodations, because people have to offer accommodations. But what are the supports that students can access that may not cost money? Or maybe it's okay to spend that money on the paid services. It depends on who you are. But will those services give you the layer of support that you think your son or daughter needs? Is it, it goes back to intrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation. Some students are required to go to these meetings twice a week. Some students, like in our case, You know, they make an appointment with their coordinator. They can drop in and see their coordinator whenever they want as long as schedule allows. But some of the services you have to plan ahead. So it really depends on, especially right now as we're in this remote environment, what can your student access for extra supports and work?
And I would say for me, I would look at the acceptance of disability, and are they folded into every program? Are they prominently displayed? Are they in a location that shows great accessibility and prominence in the student union building or an academic building? Or are they hidden in a residence hall where you have to go around to the back of the building to go find the office, and there's no signage to find it? I mean, where a disability services or accessibility services office is located speaks volumes about how valued that service is on campus and how well people do their job. And I really think that seeing disability services not only in their office, but at orientation, helping with onboarding, being involved with the onboarding process, like being really integrated into the environment makes a big difference. And I would hope that you would find a campus that really embraces disability as a normal way of doing things, and it's not a big deal to have a disability.
Yep, I agree.
And for those of you who have known us, we just finished our year-long name change. So we have been Disability Services for all these years, and we are officially now Student Accessibility Services for two very good reasons. One, we're about access, and we want the student to be focused, but it also aligns us with, for example, Worcester State. Their office is also Student Accessibility Services, and they just changed their name 4 years ago. So, you know, to keep that alignment in place. But don't be concerned, our email still says Disability Services, so we're working on that. But I think when you look at different campuses, we're housed in different places. Some people have us under academics, under academic support. Some of us have us as a student service. So when you start searching the colleges you're looking at, you know, you can put in some keywords in those searches, and it could be disability, it could be accessibility. So be aware of that.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, if there's no more questions, which I haven't seen any pop up that we haven't answered, we will wrap it up. And I want to say thank you so much. We've gotten so many compliments in the chat, and I think this was really useful. And I think I always reach out to you guys, like I said, because you give honest answers, and I think you really do prepare people for knowing what college looks like, because it is so much different. And it's a whole different world. And so I think the more we can prepare parents and students for that change, the better they'll be while they're there. So you guys feel free to reach out to any of us, because we're here and this is what we're here for. And I will be sending out a copy of the slides, and this is recorded, so this will go up on our YouTube page. So look for announcements on our Facebook page and our website for when it's up.
Great. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye, everyone.